Life is shit. Look out your window for a moment. Probably grey, I should expect. Grey outside. A grey, sprawling metropolis, stained by the urine of man and beast, dead flowers, leafless trees, the branches brittle, crawling up to the sky like the capillaries of a darts player's wife. Look down. Look at your torso. Something that was lean, nubile, perhaps more akin to the torso of a Spartan hoplite, now closely resembles a pile of cow udders stapled together and rolled across the floor of a busy hairdresser's. Now the hands. Look at your hands. The hands that were going to play the chords of a genre-defining album, pen the great novel of the 2020s. The same hands that would grasp firmly around the brush and paint the next epoch-shattering work of art. Now more familiar with the stained, yellowing keys, typing stupid emails to twats who have surrendered their lives to institutional pettiness and sycophantic twattery. That's okay, because you can go on your phone. There are plenty of people on your phone that can give you meaning. Get into crypto. Listen to the ramblings of people who release self-help books that tell you repeatedly to be a shark. To treat your office space or any place of work like an ocean, you're the one big, dirty, naughty, feisty shark. Or maybe hang out with your mates. They'll have answers for all of your problems as well, as you spend time with them, quietly sipping away at an overpriced IPA made by some mustached twat in his rich dad's London basement, listening to them chat away about people you don't know, jobs that pay better than yours, and Ronseal.
This podcast is brought to you by Ronseal.
Ronseal, yeah. Sponsored by Ronseal. No, we're not sponsored by Ronseal, but if you're there, anyone from Ronseal, Cinna Boys to Cinnamen, episode 8.
Episode 8, hello.
Hello. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. There's a chance you feel like any of the above just mentioned. You're in the right place, aren't you, Ben?
I think so.
We are the last vestige of optimism.
This is the only genuine thing you'll hear ever.
Ever. Ever. Join us as we unravel some of these feelings through the lens of cinema, chiefly the existential film. In this discussion this week, we'll be discussing existentialism as a philosophy, its application to our own lives, and of course the films and characters that have shaped our understanding of it within the medium.
Yeah, good stuff.
Expect a beefy one.
It's going to be, a bit of a tonally different one from last week, I feel.
Yes,
yeah.
I think, we very much enjoyed dismantling Marvel and Disney. But we're back to highbrow now.
Yeah.
We're back.
Yeah.
So, enjoy.
Questing the cinematic void.
So then, before we sort of get into the meat and potatoes of the discussion, i.e. the film-centred part of the discussion, we felt that it was important perhaps to give a little, I guess, sort of explanation of existentialism a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, we're sort of straying into topics that perhaps are a bit out of our reach.
Lofty.
Here. Yeah. We are by no means philosophers.
No.
School of life, mate.
Yeah. Learn it on the job.
Yeah, we've all learnt it. But I think it's really important to at least preface the discussion with an explanation of it, albeit a probably terrible one. So, essentially, existentialism is the belief that we are responsible for creating purpose and meaning in our own lives. Okay, so we are in charge.
Yeah.
We can sculpt our future, our destiny, ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea, I mean, obviously it sounds quite commonplace now. I think a lot of people are quite more than comfortable with the idea of having control over their own lives, control over where they want to go in life.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this idea was actually really revolutionary because it sort of challenged one of the sort of central philosophical ideas that existed since the birth of philosophy in Greece. This idea of essentialism, that basically everything has a pre-made property.
Okay.
So in the terms of humans, you have a set path before you that is predetermined.
Right.
This tends to sort of tie quite nicely with, obviously, theology. That's religion, isn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that you have a predetermined path decided to you by some sort of deity or godlike being or fate or whatever.
More comforting.
Yes, yeah. But fellas like Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard, who are sort of or particularly Kierkegaard, sort of one of the first people to sort of bring about this idea of the existential thought or the sort of foundational ideas of existential thought. They start to challenge this idea with what would ultimately become existentialism. And it's an idea that really took off after the Second World War. So the guy that really pushed it was Jean-Paul Sartre.
Okay.
And he latched on to this idea and expanded it further in the context of the post-war environment, which was, how could you have this essentialist belief that everyone has a predetermined path if things like the Holocaust and a war that killed like 60, 70 million people can happen? So a lot of people are abandoning faith, abandoning these ideas of these sort of predetermined fates after living what is arguably the darkest hour of the human race, collectively speaking. So they start talking about this idea of the self, the importance of the self, and that essentially the freedom is ours. We have the freedom to decide our own lives, what we do.
Which is also comforting.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
A lot of people find that discomforting, and I think this is sort of a theme we're going to explore a lot in the film, is that this freedom...
In the podcast.
What did I say?
We're making you said in the film. I was like, shit, I haven't brought my camera.
Yeah, oh, God, yeah.
Oh, dear.
This isn't a film, we haven't been making films. In the podcast, we're going to be sort of exploring films that deal with the idea of this burden of too much freedom. So, if you have all this freedom, that's quite anxiety-inducing, because now you don't have a predetermined path.
Yeah.
It's not been instructed to you by religion or by a teacher or by some sort of inherent idea within society.
Yeah.
It's your choice. So you're left to make these decisions for yourself, and that is a burden. Yeah. A burden is arguably exacerbated when you are going up against a lot of these institutions that still exist. Yeah. That arguably do dictate a lot of the way in which your life will go, regardless of what path you decide to take, the work you put in. There's a lot of people out there that say, work hard and you'll get where you want to be, which I'm sure is true in a lot of cases, but I think, there are a lot of socio-cultural and political apparatus that can prevent that in a lot of circumstances.
It's more nuanced than if you work hard, you'll get rewarded.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you only hear the stories from people that have succeeded, right? You never hear the people
History
that say...
is written by the winners.
I bet it all, and now I live in my mum's garage. No one's gonna
listen to them.
No one's gonna go, this guy seems like he knows what he's on about.
I'm gonna carry on listening.
Wow, look at that, he's using his mum's bike as a bed frame. This guy's got his life together. Another thing that existentialism does, and I think this ties in particularly when we start talking about the work of Charlie Kaufman, is the absurd. So it's not necessarily the idea that life can be silly. The absurd is more sort of the search for answers in a meaningless or answerless world. It's the idea of being born into a meaningless place that then requires you to make meaning. And this absurdist idea posts that there is no rules, as we've said, no truths that religion would offer, no guidelines. Ignore it all. And you develop your own code to live by, both in the decisions you make, but also morally. Yeah. You can see already that obviously this could be quite a burden.
Yeah.
But in order to sort of combat that, Sartre offers the idea about living authentically. It sort of means you have to live with the sort of responsibility of controlling your own freedom, despite the absurd. So despite the meaningless, you can still have a sense of control. Okay. So if you didn't, if you surrendered to control, then you are living an absurd life in the eyes of Sartre.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And that's sort of it, really. That's a sort of whistle-stop tour through the ideas of existentialism. Yeah. It's an idea that I've been drawn to, certainly in my sort of 20s, when I sort of read a couple of books and thought, I feel it. Oh, I feel it, man. In that sort of hazy phase of your life where you think it's cool. You have them on your bookshelf to sort of look cool. But as I've got older, and I've started to understand it a little bit more, again, to call my knowledge of this stuff cursory would be an insult to people who had a cursory knowledge, but... I think it's an idea that's grown more and more in the forefront of my mind as I've sort of, navigated life and had various jobs and dealt with weird people within those jobs who, and I just think it's something that's grown within me, I guess. What are your sort of thoughts about it? Is it a philosophy you subscribe to?
Increasingly, same as you, absolutely, increasingly. I actually didn't attribute it to existentialism at all. I saw it very much in the context of religion versus science.
Okay.
It's a very similar set of frameworks, right?
Yes.
And I think science is, by definition, a rule book. But it's not a rule book about meaning. It's a rule book about it's an observational framework, right? This isn't something that has been decided on based on experience. It's based on facts and studies and things like that. And I think, the idea of existentialism ties in really well with that. So I've explored, definitely in my 20s, a lot more. I'm suddenly fascinated by physics, right? Didn't give a shit about it at school. I thought it was really badly taught and boring, and it was all about like algebra and stuff. And now I'm like absolutely fascinated by it. I think it's like really... I mean, the lack of meaning is so bizarrely meaningful to me. There's a great... I think it's Brian Cox who was just like... I mean, he wasn't kind of bashing Christianity or anything like that at all, but he did just say like what more do you want? Like, we've discovered all these things and we can photograph it, and like this is what we've found, and like what more do you need? So in that way, I think it's fascinating. But I didn't realise that it was so closely linked.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people assume that existentialism is anti-religious. It isn't really.
No,
I mean, the origins of it date back to the era of Kierkegaard, and he was religious. He believed in the idea of a creator. He just wasn't convinced that the creator put you on the earth to do some predetermined, or a set of predetermined things. So it's not necessarily something that's anti-religious, but I like your idea that your sort of existentialist thoughts have taken you to like a new subject area to try and make sense of it all.
It was
turning to science to try and make sense of
just
the unanswerable.
Exactly. And I don't. You're totally right. I don't think I can discount religion.
No, not at all.
Life at all, because you don't need to. The wonderful thing about science is, and the wonderful thing I guess about existentialism is, with those higher questions about higher being, the answer isn't no, it's we don't know, right? I think that is kind of weirdly comforting to me.
Absolutely, and I think that should govern a lot of
the way we behave. I guess.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, for me, it's something that I've grown in. I don't know, like the idea of the absurd is something that really sticks out to me.
Okay.
I don't know, like I've really struggled to not see the absurdity in so much stuff, and I'm also conscious that because I went through that phase, like I said, of reading it and thinking, I'm gonna go buy a beret, which I never did, but I was basically there. You don't want to be one of those people that sees no value in anything, because that's not really what existentialism is, really. Nor is it a healthy way to live your life. I don't think it's particularly healthy to have a sort of explicitly nihilistic outlook.
No.
But I think it encourages you to sort of see value in things away from, I don't know, sort of fiscal areas or more monetary things, and maybe physical things and
day-to-day things, like routine. I think people can become weirdly obsessed with routine, and that's a great way to break away from it, is just to kind of embrace the absurd, because absurdity by its very nature is, I guess, a lack of routine, right? It's disorder, and that's fine.
No, I think I like it. It's also worth pointing out as well, through some of the films we're going to discuss the sort of more questionable acts of the philosophy. There's a lot of ideas about existentialism in terms of morality and the sort of darker aspects of human behaviour. How does existentialism answer to those things? So it'd be worth, certainly with one of the films that we both have watched fairly recently, I think that'll phrase quite nicely.
Without a doubt. Which
we'll reveal later. So I'm telling you now for some reason. Got to keep the tension up.
We're like Davina. We're like, ears. Ooh.
I guess we want to start talking about films then, really.
Let's do it.
This isn't a sort of armchair philosophy podcast. This is a film podcast after all. So we're going to start with Charlie Kaufman, a filmmaker and screenwriter that I think has had a profound impact, not only on the medium of cinema, but both of us.
Yeah.
I think, arguably, he is one of the most inventive filmmakers right now.
Certainly unique. But his ability to bring that uniqueness to kind of, I wouldn't say mainstream, but on the fringes of mainstream films, especially with films like Being John Malkovich and Adaptation specifically.
Yeah, agreed.
I actually haven't seen Anomalisa, but I've heard good things. Anyway.
Yeah, great film. Performed terribly at the box office, which is a theme of his more recent work, which I think is worth discussing a little bit later on, because it's so fucking infuriating that that's the case, but something to talk about. I think what makes him so great alongside of the sort of cinematic stuff is I just feel like he is one of the most honest filmmakers because of the way he sort of willingly submits to complete vulnerability through self-reflexivity in his films. So he's not afraid to sort of explore the sort of gnawing anxieties that eat away at him, both personally and creatively. He's also not afraid to explore the parts of ourselves that we obscure from others, be that the desires we have, the wants and needs, the hopes, shortcomings, those things that we obscure to the apparent betterment of ourselves. And also like the wounds that the psychological wounds, the deep wounds that haunt us and define us. I think if you look across all of his films, there are examples of all of those things. And then, of course, they're all driven by that word, existential angst. Existential angst. It's sort of in the same ballpark as existential crisis, a phrase I think you hear a lot of people say.
Oh, yeah, commonplace.
This idea of not knowing where you are, what you're doing, suddenly awakening in your life, and then looking back and forwards and thinking, shit, and panicking. I think his films are totally driven by that. Oh, yeah. Almost explicitly. I mean, there are other ideas which he uses to explore the ideas of existential angst in his films. But I think it's something we alluded to earlier, but it's about the feelings of powerlessness that are exacerbated when stacked up against the expectations of the world.
Okay, yeah.
So I said that briefly in our deeply penetrative analysis of existentialism in the conversation's opening. But, I think that's when it becomes all the more obvious. The feelings that you have, the things some of them inexplicable, some of them more easier to articulate, but never able to properly express. Unless around a very small group of people. It almost like creates its own confinement within, which can only deepen these feelings. And I don't know. I just think he does it. There's few filmmakers that do it with such energy like him.
Yeah, he. I'm specifically talking about adaptation a little bit.
Oh yeah, go for it.
There's a bit at the beginning, the first scene, which is even though I'm not talking about Being John Malkovich, but the first scene is set on the set of Being John Malkovich,
right? Yeah,
and there's it's like a kind of behind the scenes mock up, and it zooms in on Kaufman, or the titular Kaufman, I guess. He's played by Nicolas Cage, but it's effectively Kaufman or Kaufman, and he's just observing in the distance, right? He's just like looking around and. He looks so anxious and just so uncertain about everything. He's got he's almost signature pained expression and just confusion. And I think Charlie Kaufman creates sort of existential uncertainty by sort of forcing his characters to observe other people. Like asking questions like, "Why am I not like them?" So and why is it that I have to put effort into things that others seem to kind of coast through? I think it's, but adaptation is just that as a film. This guy is just struggling so much with things like stupid male things, right? Like balding and wanting to be good at what he does, and it's just. The film is effectively about him adapting an unadaptable book, right, about orchids. The fact that he's so wrapped up in wanting to be normal. That's where that existential angst and existential crisis comes from in all his films.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. No, I love it. I particularly love the idea of existential angst through observation.
Yeah.
So observing people that just seem to have their life so together.
Yeah, exactly.
And people that can sort of just,
I mean, that's exacerbated by things like advertising and magazines with thin people on them, right? That's a very common thing that a lot of people have take issue with nowadays. And it's uncertainty through observation and wondering why do I feel like I don't fit in? It's quite a basic and very widespread way of thinking about who you are, but that's what Kaufman I think does really well.
He does. I think he manages to make those themes and ideas simultaneously engaging and sort of accessible, but also really complex at the same time. And I think the way he achieves that complexity is through his approach to narrative structure. He plays with time a lot in his movies, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And there's that sort of surrealist tone. I mean, I know, again, surrealism is a tone that gets bandied around a lot, but I think with Kaufman it's completely merited, right? I think few people would argue that he isn't brilliant at it.
He's earned it.
Yeah, and I think like surrealism lends itself brilliantly to existentialism. They almost can go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because he can use that sort of approach of cutting up time, flitting between various iterations of the same character.
Yeah.
Different mental states of each character, but in a way that speaks so much to the sort of pulsating anxieties and worries and narcissistic tendencies that are within all of his characters. Because I think that's a really interesting thing about it as well. I think one of the more comedic elements of his treatment of the existential ideas in his films is the way that his characters come across a bit narcissistic, a bit self-absorbed.
Yeah, oh yes.
But they're not evil, they're not bad, and in many ways, through his approach to narrative, you're with them in a way that you don't dislike them for that.
No, you don't necessarily identify with them. I mean, at least I didn't really, but you don't. At the same time, you kind of understand where they're coming from, right?
Yeah.
It's an extreme example of, I mean, I'm speaking only for myself at the moment, but it's an extreme example of the anxieties that everyone faces. Yeah, I think.
Interesting. Okay,
that's what I sort of,
because I think Kaufman is very sincere.
Yeah,
and I think I've seen him in interviews. I've watched a few interviews in preparation for this podcast research. But he's clearly quite an anxious fella.
I've heard stories from like studio execs to say he's quite difficult to approach. Difficult to give notes to.
And he is. He is, and I really like that about him actually.
Yeah, me too.
But I think
he's kind of he's sort of he has Final Cut by proxy then, doesn't he?
Yeah, which is so bizarre for someone that sort of makes films about being powerless.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder how much of the fight he might have to put up. I might imagine even now, so after the sort of poor box office success of two of his recent films, or not his recent films, but his most recent films.
Yeah, was that? I'm thinking of Ending Things.
No, before then.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Sorry, I forgot about thinking of ending things. I'm thinking
Anomalies
and Synecdoche, New York.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
But Synecdoche, New York, particularly, is just a sprawling. I think it's just probably. I don't know if it's my favourite film of his. I sort of maybe should have thought about ranking them in my head beforehand, but with a filmmaker that you cherish so much, it's so hard.
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
But it's just a brilliant film, and the fact that didn't make its money back is.
It's a shame.
Even make its money back is a shame.
Yeah.
Moving on slightly from that, I think back to that honesty, even if there are maybe perhaps extreme examples of anxiety or bordering on being neurotic.
Yeah.
I think it's the honesty that allows you to connect with him, even if him and his characters, even if they may appear extreme. Because his honesty isn't lost on you as an audience member, and I think when you feel the honesty, you connect with even the most extreme versions of himself, perhaps in his characters.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I do. Maybe I did kind of jump the gun a bit with saying that you don't connect with him. I do remember in an adaptation warming to his plight a lot more, especially in the third act when it gets really weird with like the alligators and stuff.
Yeah.
And that he has a conversation with his brother in the woods when they're all lost, and that's a really, really sweet moment if I remember correctly. I can't even remember what the conversation's about, but it's a pretty existential one. If I remember.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think he's. I've said it already, but he's just one of my absolute favourites, and someone that if you're not, I mean, I assume if you're listening, you have the same levels of passion for us. So obviously, I assume you probably have seen his work. But on the off chance you're listening and aren't familiar, check his films out. Charlie Kaufman. He's one of the best.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Why do you think, just quickly before we move on, why do you think his films haven't been that successful, commercially speaking?
I think they are really difficult to market.
Okay.
Because how do you market adaptation?
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, being
how do you market Synecdoche, New York? I mean, fucking hell. I mean, that is
because you can't even put Nicolas Cage on the poster because Kaufman is, like you say, so honest about what the majority of blokes in their kind of early 30s end up looking like, that you can't really put him on the poster. The poster's him, it's like a broken flower pot with half his face.
Yeah.
And it's not off-putting. I think it's really creative. But if I saw that, and if I didn't know it was Kaufman, and if I saw that in the cinema, like on the wall, I'd be like, all right. You know what I mean? They're just they're very hard to market. I remember Synecdoche, New York, having a really bizarre. They were in the marketing strategies between Synecdoche, New York, and Holy Motors were interchangeable. I get those films confused.
Oh, okay.
Because the posters are so similar. And
really? Okay.
Maybe I'm thinking. I don't know. I might be wrong in that assumption. I'm sure we'll get hundreds of tweets explaining the key and intricate differences between.
Twitter.
No. Yeah, but I think that's the answer. Really difficult to market, and maybe also it might be difficult for audiences to accept that honesty.
Yeah,
it's a lack of escapism, which is something we talked about last week, and it might be that.
Yeah. I think you've just sort of taken the words right out of my mouth there. I think there are a few films of that ilk that achieve the kind of success that spills over from, the independent scenes into mainstream.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the idea that as film as escapism, as we discussed earlier, as you said, is something that rings true, and I don't think a lot of people who have that idea about what film is are going to be that driven to watch a film about some neurotic fella sort of unpacking his anxieties about the modern world. Very palpable and real anxieties that can probably be applied to your own life, but if you want to escape, it's probably not the best person to go to, is he really? No. And as much as I love him and as much as I would defend him to the hilt, but I don't know, because you sometimes you get films that really do spill over and do have a sort of broader appeal. I mean, you've sort of mentioned being John Malkovich. I mean, I'm not saying it was like the kind of hit that sprawled across all areas of the box office. Yeah, but it's a film that a lot of people know of. So clearly there was at some point an appetite for him beyond the realms of people that were just in love with his work.
Also, being John Malkovich can be explained in a sentence. It's
right.
So again, from a marketing standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. You can just say, "Oh, this is a film." However absurd it sounds, you can be like, the film is about someone gaining access to John Malkovich's head. And you're like, okay, bloody hell, that sounds really weird, but might be interesting. And like films like Adaptation, Synecdoche, New York, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things, they're a bit more difficult to explain. Maybe,
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of variables that perhaps I should have researched before asking the question, but I don't know. It's an interesting point, and it's a really sad point, perhaps, to end this part of the discussion on, because we love them so much. But there we go.
Yeah.
So the next film we wanted to discuss, so we're going to sort of zero in our focus a little bit, not just focus necessarily on the work of a particular filmmaker, but a particular film. Now, this is a film that, upon deciding last week this would be the topic we would discuss, was the first film that came to my mind, and the film that I subsequently lent to you, Ben.
Yes.
To watch in preparation for this episode, and that is 5 Easy Pieces.
Yeah.
So a film from 1970, director Bob Rafelson, part of this new Hollywood bunch.
Yes.
He'd worked on, as a producer, Easy Rider beforehand.
Okay.
So you're already getting this idea of the tone and the sort of style of filmmaking that he's gonna bring to the table as a director. I don't know, like it just sort of came to me straight away as one of the quintessential American films about these existential feelings. In a way that it sort of packages them, if I can use the term packages them, that sort of cheapens it, but it really explores what it is to feel completely lost, whilst both reflecting on the necessity to try and find some sense of meaning, but also how much damage you can do to yourself and others in the pursuit of that meaning. Yeah,
definitely. That was what was so surprising, because I thought when I popped it in the old DVD player, Blu-ray player actually, sorry.
Steady on, don't get that wrong.
I thought I was, at the very least, going to sort of like the guy.
Yeah.
And whilst he's not a total write-off, he exhibits some very unintentionally destructive traits. So he's very, very unfaithful to his sort of partner, isn't he? And the way he treats his family he's indifferent to a lot of things, and and it's all in the pursuit of something better, like, you know, the greener pastures, effectively.
Yes.
And he's kind of, you get the impression that he's sort of taken on a sort of semi, not nomadic, but he's a bit of a drifter. He's not locked into anything, and he's quite proud of that, isn't he?
Yeah.
He doesn't ever find meaning in the film. And I think that's the point, is to kind of overindulge on the idea of finding meaning is actually to lose meaning.
Yeah.
Lose the people that you love, and maybe cultivate relationships that aren't the best and are like more destructive than you might realise. Mm-hmm. You can act selfishly, and your behaviour can be quite sort of cavalier. And there's a great part at the end of this film where he sort of realises this a little bit when he's talking to his dad. Do you remember that? Right at the end. And
Jack Nicholson, by the way, is in the lead. Sorry to interrupt you, Ben.
No.
He had real issues with that scene with the director.
Oh, really?
So Bob Rafelson essentially said to him that they would meet and deconstruct the character and what the character was going to do. And Rafelson said to him, "You need to have one scene where you cry."
Yes.
Jack Nicholson was dead against it.
Right.
He was really vehemently against it. Vehemently against it. You know, he really didn't think it suited the character, suited the tone of the movie.
Okay.
But he did it anyway.
Really?
And Rafelson, I was watching an interview with him about it, research, and he was saying that he basically, all the crew left the set, and he shot it holding the boom, looking away. So I'm actually looking away from the mic. And shot the scene, and he didn't even see the take.
Oh, really?
Which drew further ire from Jack Nicholson, who then said, "Well, that's the only scene you're getting, the only take you're getting."
Wow.
In the film.
There you go.
So, but no, it ends up being one of the most important scenes in the film. I'll give the reins back to you, but I felt that was interesting to sort of like just force it in there.
Yeah, I mean, the realization. It's a slight realization, because the behaviour afterwards, it largely sort of goes back to the way he was afterwards. But he does realise this, and it's because he's sort of shagged his brother's missus, hasn't he?
Yeah,
and he's attached.
Yeah,
he's attached meaning to that relationship really quickly, and she's a bit taken aback by that. And she's like, "Well, hold on a minute. This is meant to be a bit of an adulterous fling."
Yeah.
So he's really quickly gone from being this like sort of morally reckless drifter to like kind of attaching almost out of desperation meaning onto this new woman. Mm-hmm. And then her reaction to that is obviously naturally slightly
cautious.
Yeah, she's very she's cautious, right?
Yeah.
She's like, Jesus Christ, this
guy.
Yeah. And that is when he realises, I think that's when he has that moment with his dad. But the switch in his mind is like, right, something's got to change. And the way, I mean, we're going to spoiler territory from a film from the 1970s, but the way he deals with that is the exact same way that he's dealt with things before, which is to run away and, try and find those greener pastures again. And that was really powerful, I thought, that kind of that ending and that loop, it's unfortunate.
I think it's a great little bit of insight there. No, genuinely, I think what I really love about the film is we sort of talked about its attempt to find meaning, but it's the physical attempt. So through relocation, not necessarily just physically, but in a class sense as well. So, Nicholson basically plays this character who leaves a life of affluence. He leaves Washington, a rich family in Washington, a family of musicians, of which he is one of.
Yes.
A very good musician with potential, who could have sort of maybe assailed his own heights as a musician into the world of music and playing. He's a pianist. And he leaves that life. He finds that life stifling, and he removes himself from one social strata to another, to the sort of blue-collar American Midwest. Man's work,
hoping to find solace in I guess what he would perceive to be the real people, right?
Common man, wrapping chains around poles,
that's
getting oil all over him, and playing cards and drinking and shagging around. And it's what I find so impactful about that is it's sort of in what you said there is like these attempts to find meaning are so misguided and almost based on these ridiculous caricatures of people below you. You know what I mean? These class caricatures, the sort of freedoms that they have by not having to worry about the pressures. I guess the pressures of coming from a wealthy family and what that does to you.
Like social pressures.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, those things by no means, they're not like, they're still important. They can still cause damage. I'm not saying that they're things that should be ignored, but this idea that he thinks that people below him have got, I don't know, it's an interesting point. But what the film slowly does is it, I guess, sort of in the true style that's true to form for New Hollywood, is the pacing isn't sort of concerned with revealing things immediately.
Yeah,
it's about drip feeding this throughout the narrative, and it's mostly done via Jack Nicholson's shoulders. He shoulders a lot of the film's thematic weight,
definitely,
and in the interactions that he has with others, and you slowly start to piece together this life. So you have no idea that he's come from a wealthy background.
No.
You have no idea what the source of this sort of attitude that he has that has driven him to sort of alienate everyone around him. To frequently display sort of misogynistic attitudes and behaviour to women.
Yeah.
And I guess in that way, I think it's really important that Raffleson's vision and Nicholson's vision, because I think they worked very closely on this film, as they did with, I think, 3 or 4 subsequent other films.
Okay.
It's also worth noting it's his first big screen performance. Well, like in a leading role.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because he just looks so fucking confident. I think he was just
ready.
He was just the perfect guy for the era, right?
Oh man, totally.
But it sort of drip feeds these ideas about his backstory, in a way that not only sort of is emblematic of the time and this new approach to storytelling, but also really important to the themes and ideas of the film, because it is about that rudderlessness, that lack of knowing anything, and as an audience member, you are with him on that journey because you have to stick with him to find out why he's like this. It doesn't justify it by any stretch of the imagination, but you can start to sort of peel back the layers of a person that is just clearly fucking broken.
Yeah.
And his attempts to fix himself, as you say earlier, are just misguided.
Yeah. Fruitless.
He sort of sinks into vice, decadence, but sort of like a dusty, sort of lower class version of decadence, which is drinking cheap beer, going bowling, you know, and it doesn't give him anything. You feel that emptiness, which I think is a real hallmark of the most impactful existential films. You feel there's a shared sense of emptiness between you and the screen, the character on the screen. And I remember when the film ended in that scene, because he's playing piano, isn't he, on the truck, on the back of the truck?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's just, I remember thinking, like, fucking hell, like. It just hits you and it just lingers with you, and
it does that last moment when he gets in the truck on that logger's truck, right?
Yeah,
and the guy, and it's just a conversation. They're like, "Are you cold? Do you want a jacket?" And he's like, "No, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. I've got what I need."
Yeah,
and he's given his wallet to his missus as well.
Oh yeah, because he just leaves, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's literally just got nothing. Crazy and very. You can identify with him, but you can also sort of see his behaviour as abhorrent as well at the same time, and you're really kind of like, I get where you're coming from. You're not helping yourself, mate. But he has, by the end, he's smelling shit everywhere he's going, and he's started to check his shoe, right, ever so slightly. But it's such a shame that you don't get to see him properly experience meaning, which is really impactful in itself. Just not seeing that, I think.
Well, I think it sort of ties really nicely with what you said right at the start of the discussion regarding the film, is that the sort of ceaseless pursuit of that meaning will get you nowhere necessarily. Yeah. And if you are relying on yourself to find that meaning and only yourself, you are probably not going to get the happiness that you so desperately crave.
No, and we've talked about this film already, but it does sort of tie in a little bit into The Wild, where the bit at the end where he's like, "Fuck, I need other people. I actually need other people.
Yeah.
And I can find meaning naturally, and I don't need to look for it myself, because that's not how you find it. It comes to you. Like if you just sort of let it wash over you as an experience and a social experience, then it can come to you naturally. Perhaps like later on that night, where you're just like, that was a good day. You know what I mean? That's what I sort of think, and that's the way I sort of try and live as much as possible. But yeah.
No, I think Nicholson's character, he thinks that the way to find meaning is by rejecting everyone, pushing everyone away, as we said earlier. But yeah, I think in the process of making yourself vulnerable, do you probably get the sense of warmth and meaningness that you might be lacking. I don't know. Interesting. But a great film.
Good stuff.
It's often overlooked when people talk about the great films of New Hollywood. Certainly, that film is always overlooked, and I don't know why. I only became aware of it I think I was sort of just mindlessly trawling the internet I just do that, looking for DVDs and Blu-rays to buy, 'cause I'm a loser. And that was one that came up, and I did a little bit of research, and I remember a few people talking about it at uni whose opinions I really valued, and I thought, well, I've completely forgot about this. And then just watched it, and it just, has made a real impact to me, and is easily, I think, one of the definitive films of that era.
Okay, yeah.
I think.
Liked it a lot, yeah.
Yeah,
really good experience watching it for the first time, and I encourage you to do the same.
Agreed, yeah. It ties into that era so beautifully in the sense that people are wanting those reflective experiences, and trying to understand why they feel this way.
Yeah.
I mean, we've touched on this before about sort of New Hollywood. I think, it's an era that has a real impact on me, and I'm sure you as well, because I obviously never stopped talking about it, but just quickly before we move on. Nicholson's character is sort of emblematic of that desire of the younger generation's need to find meaning, because they're probably those people that have been brought up in their sort of white picket fence parts of the world and told by this rigid American sort of very conservative at the time ideology that this is the best place in the world and it's not, there's faultless. And these people are starting to realise actually this isn't the case. And I think he's... I think I said that Taxi Driver was the most defining example of that era, and I think this film is definitely up there on a par in a way that's perhaps more relatable.
Nifty.
Good. Right. Go on then, Ben. You've got another.
Yes.
Shoot.
Okay, so this is something I've been thinking about this past week because I knew the topic was coming up. I do think that most films, broadly speaking, have a tinge of existentialism about them. Perhaps more focused on a particular sort of type of angst, I guess.
Okay.
But films that aren't chiefly concerned with it can still have it peppered within them, because that's sort of what a lot of films are. Is they're meant to be life affirming, and they're meant to sort of maybe reshape the way you think about a certain subject.
What is the sort of meaning of a great film if it's not going to do that? I mean, it's going to sound a bit sort of wanky, but all great art should do that. It should make you think more deeply about a certain subject, or encourage further investigation into another subject.
Definitely, yeah. And with that in mind, I don't know if anyone would have seen this. I've got a shoehorn another Danny Boyle film into
It's only a matter of time.
I was weighing up. I was like, should I do Sunshine or should I do Millions? I'm going to do Millions, right?
I don't think I've seen it. You mentioned it before we started recording. I'm trying to give us a sort of brief overview, see if it jigs the memory.
So it's about a family from Manchester, especially the sort of 7-year-old, the youngest of two brothers, Damien.
Okay.
And he's obsessed with saints.
Right.
And he...
Sounds like a legend.
Yeah. And he's a very kind of... He subscribes a lot to sort of religious ideology, like quite a lot, but he's 7 years old, right? So it's played very innocently,
right? And
he's kind of delighted by the idea of a saint, effectively. And his mum's died,
right?
So his dad, played by James Nesbitt, who's in a lot of kind of middle of the road police procedural stuff now. He's really good in this, actually. So his dad is bringing him up on his own. So him and his brother Anthony are kind of getting brought up on their own, and the film's just about them finding a big duffel bag full of money that falls seemingly out of the sky, and Damien thinks it's from God, right? And his brother is like, no, this is because of I should mention also the England is adopting the euro.
Right, okay.
And that's why they find the money, because actually what's happened is the British pounds are getting burnt and they're on a train and it gets robbed. And one of the duffel bags full of money gets thrown from the train. But Damien, being like 7 and kind of obsessed with saints, thinks it's from God, basically. So the reason I want to talk about it, you might be thinking like...
Well, I haven't seen it. It doesn't jog a memory, but I'm interested to hear your view on it. There's a couple of scenes which really... it's a family film, by and large, but there's just a couple of scenes that really lapse into the clash between... It was existentialism and what was the other one? With the Essentialism.
Essentialism and existentialism, right? And one of them is their dad finds out about the money, and he's going to take it because his house has just been burgled. and he has to take. He's like, we need this money now, right? And it's just, there's this moment where 7-year-old Damien's like, it's wrong, you can't do this. And he just says to him, it's like fucking heartbreaking. Out of nowhere, he goes, look around you, Damien. We're on our own. Like, no one is looking out for us. And it's just, you can see, it's James Nesbitt performance, but you can see, like, in this guy's, he's just so broken. It's the first time you really kind of got to think, like, shit, this guy's actually, like, lost his wife. And he's lost a lot of the things that he previously attached meaning to. And he's left with nothing but this sort of existential
dread,
yeah. And he's expressing it to a 7-year-old son, who's so delighted by the idea that there's a path in front of you, and it's just heartbreaking, right? Yeah, and he does mention his mum as well. He goes, well, Mum wouldn't want you to... And he just says to him, it's horrible. He just looks him square in the eye. He goes, your mum's dead, right? She's dead, Damien, and you'll never see her again. It's fucking... like, and this is a family film. Like, it's really horrendous to this... It just popped into my own head like a couple of days ago. And so the film out of nowhere starts to deal with the way that, like, death and the way that religion can kind of play into how a 7-year-old might perceive the world. And as he's growing up, he's getting introduced to all these sort of, like, more lofty adult ideas.
Yeah.
But then, really quickly, sorry, I'm
banging
on about this.
No.
Again, slight spoilers here, but it's not really a spoiler. I mean, if you do want to watch, I would encourage you to watch it.
Yeah,
it's a really sweet little film. The Damien character sort of imagines saints walking around, and you kind of, so you can see them interacting with him and sort of giving him advice. So he sees his mum on a railway line.
Yeah.
And it's a moment of realisation that he sees her as a bit of a saintly figure.
Okay.
And it's going to sound very cheesy and very trite what I'm about to say, but it really works in the context of the film, I promise you. She just says to him, he asks her, like, if you're a saint, what was your miracle? And you kind of know what she's going to say. She goes, it was you. And it's just like
the money.
It's that cash, that big bag of cash. Yeah.
The 9-inch dildo in my bedside drawer.
Oh dear.
Imagine if you just said that and the film just ended.
Yeah. Oh no! Oh dear! I love that film dearly. That's how horrendous.
Sorry. Yeah.
No. It's fine.
But Boyle is great at that. Boyle is great at that because those films in his early career. I mean, I haven't seen it, so obviously I can't speak about it too much. We're well informed here at Sunday Boys, the Cinema. But no, he's really good at that. He's really good at making those things palatable.
Yeah, he really is. As well.
Whereas others, it'd be like really saccharine, and the kind of film you sort of expect to see in like playing in an old people's home. Yeah. You know what I mean? But
it helps they're from Manchester. There's something really sincere about that accent.
Yeah,
I agree. Loves it. It's that a marriage all of a sudden of existential ideas. You know, the idea that your life is out of your hands the idea that life is in your own hands in a sense, and then the idea that doesn't mean that miracles can't happen, and actually what we should be considering miracles as things that happen every day, but because they don't mean something broadly, it can still mean something to you. And that bit where she's like, you're my miracle, I just think that is just a wonderful kind of concept, you know? Great film, check it out if you haven't seen it.
Lovely. As always, Ben, you always make films. You make me want to watch them straight away. So I'll put it on the list.
Yeah, do it.
Because I love Danny Boyle. You know, I really love him. When he hits, he really hits for me. So I'll check it out. Charming
little film, that.
And when was it? What era? When was it made?
2004.
Okay, so sort of early 2000s. Yeah, that's the kind of movie, the kind of time where that movie would work in, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go slightly further afield from Manchester with my pick.
Skegness.
Skegness, yes.
That's where Ronseal's headquarters are, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, I just many a memory of sort of my eyes moving away from the beach to that flag, the Ronseal flag, the Ronseal flag just flapping in the skeggy wind. No, the film I want to talk about is Akira Kurosawa's Akiru.
Right. Okay.
So, in the very much in the same way that you like to shoehorn Boyle in, I like to shoehorn Kurosawa.
Nice.
Because I could go on. But,
No.
So the film is essentially about the act of finding meaning in your final moments or final months. So the film follows a character played by Takashi Shimura, who is a bit of a Kurosawa mainstay. I mean, a lot of people attribute a lot of the praise towards Toshiro Mifune. Obviously, he's the big guy, isn't he? The big sort of the big actor of Japanese cinema of the time. But I think Shimura is not far behind in terms of, not necessarily, he lacks maybe the star power and the sort of presence of Mifune, because Mifune would play these sort of, these big, powerful, flawed characters that always have like make the loudest noise, bang around the most. I mean, he's one of my absolute favourite actors. So I'm not saying he doesn't deserve that, but Shimura gets this role to sort of flex his own muscles.
Okay.
So Shimura plays this guy, this lonely soul's etched out this life, 30 years of his life, I should say, in this local government position.
Right.
And it's a really bureaucratic institution, painfully bureaucratic. The way that Kurosawa displays that, it just captures the sort of frustration. If you've ever tried to get in touch with the local council or something like that, it just captures it. Yeah. But it's a place that's devoid of passion or colour, and a place that rewards a sense of detachment. You will succeed through being detached.
Yeah.
So if you don't consider the implications of what you've done, so in this case he works like a local institution that obviously will impact the lives of people who live in the area. If you can detach yourself from that, you will succeed.
Okay.
At the expense of your humanity.
Yeah.
And he's obviously just coasted and drifted through these 30 years of his life. Obviously a sad man, a sad soul, but someone that's committed to this life all the same.
Sounds very post-war, this.
Yes. So
the idea of the soldier is effectively it's a very similar notion.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's a very much a lot of Kurosawa's pre-samurai films, or I mean, I'm not sure if it's a pre-samurai film, but there's his noirish sort of films. Very much post-war Japan is the backdrop. Obviously it would be because it's post-war, but it's deliberate narrative device. To explore a lot of the ideas a lot of the themes and ideas that Japan is going through in that time.
Yeah.
And in this case, Shimura's character, after all this time in his life, living silently, having this job, he is told that he has stomach cancer.
Oh, man.
And I think it's 6 months he has to live. And upon finding that out, he begins to try and find a sense of meaning in his life. So reflecting backwards at his job, what he's done, the legacy he leaves behind, and also looking forward, like how do I, after sort of looking back on my life and thinking, oh, fucking hell, I've not really done a lot here.
Yeah.
How can I suddenly give myself this sense of meaning? So the film sort of charts this journey, this path to moral enlightenment. I mean, I don't want to sort of spoil the film too much, but I sort of have to a little bit.
Yeah.
The film sort of charts this journey and what he does to achieve that moral enlightenment, and then he dies. And then the rest of the film is his co-workers, colleagues, discussing his legacy and the meaning, the reasons, trying to sort of ascertain the reasons from a dead man why he did the thing that he does in the film.
Okay.
So he tries to find meaning through decadence. So he tries partying, and that just sort of deepens his woe because he can't connect. He doesn't, and he tries various other things. For the act of sort of brevity, I'm going to sort of shoot through, but he eventually realizes that he can use his position as a government official to build a play park in this area where he lives. And this area is like, classic sort of post-war. That's why I'm saying classic, because I've not seen it,
classic
not been there.
post-war.
Classic post-war Japan. You've been there. But no, the way, again, we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes. Your idea of these things is sculpted by the films you watch, right?
Yeah. Totally.
And I feel like with Kurosawa, it's honest and earnest enough to sort of say that. So, but it's obviously I think it's like a bomb crater with water in it. It's like really wet and dirty and horrible, this patch of land.
Yeah.
And he endeavours to build a park for the kids in it.
Okay.
For local children.
It's like creation through destruction, right? Ooh. Destruction is a form of creation. There you go.
Oh, baby. There we go. That's it. It's over.
Sorry.
No. So it's this idea of, finding meaning through benefiting others, through helping others.
Yeah.
So this person that's lived this sheltered life, who's excelled in his career by sheltering himself from the impact of his actions at work, by detaching himself from the world and almost having this robotic viewpoint, which is encouraged by the bureaucratic systems of government, and he pours all of his remaining energy into just giving this community, the children of this community, something to enjoy, something to cherish.
Oh man!
So I don't know, like, and it's, I guess sort of through the modern lens, it sounds cheesy, but this film is honestly, it's the fucking blueprint. I mean, I think it's been copied quite recently. I think there's a Bill Nighy film.
Oh really?
That's out. That's basically an English version of Akiru.
Oh right.
So it's a story as sort of as old as time, that moral reawakening when you've got when you're facing death.
Yes. Okay.
And I guess I don't think I'm facing death. I hope I'm not facing death. But if I was, it would encourage, I guess, that one to reflect on your life in a more visceral way.
Yeah,
and the way he does that is, and then he obviously, as I said before, he comes to this conclusion that he wants to help people. He wants to contribute positively to people's lives.
It's almost the opposite of Jack Nicholson's character.
Yeah. It works as
Pieces.
quite a good counterpoint because it covers those same themes. looking back on your life, and perhaps I think by detaching himself from the impact of his job, he's also detaching himself from those questions. From those sort of existential pangs that are probably residual, that are bubbling underneath. That he sort of covers in like paper and the clacking of his typewriter and the sort of glasses on the nose approach, being very sort of nothing gets by him, and it serves nothing really. It's not serving anyone positively. And then I don't know. It's such a beautifully. I mean, Shimura's performance is just, he just plays this, a guy who's sort of, he starts off hunched and almost. I mean, it's black and white, but you can just sense this sallowness to his complexion, to who he is. And I don't think that's necessarily makeup, that's just performance. It's amazing how much performance can sort of add that colour, even in a black and white film.
No, definitely.
And as the film progresses, he sort of becomes more alive. The more he realises the path to meaning is through giving other people hope or helping others, the more he sort of comes alive in himself. And it sounds trite now, as I've said. It does sound trite, but it's such a perfect movie. Again, because you mentioned that sort of post-war thing, it ties in with the film as well.
I think, those sort of themes can be explored in a sort of subtle enough manner that when you watch it, it doesn't appear obvious or saccharine or... I think it's all about how you present them, and I can imagine. I've not seen it, admittedly.
Okay, fair enough.
I can imagine he would do that in quite a subtle fashion. So
yeah. I mean, Kurosawa can just. I mean, so everyone talks about samurai films, and rightly so, because they're fucking some of the best things you'll ever see. There might be a degree of bias there, but he's the man. His noirs are just. I think by setting his films in that period and that time, there's a real sort of introspective look at the sort of the Japanese condition in that particular period of time. That sort of westernization of Japanese culture is encroaching on certain values. That's not to say that Japan before that didn't have problems. But I mean, that idea that the bureaucracy of government and making things sort of inaccessible and difficult. And all it takes is just one person to sort of have a moral reawakening to actually use the power that he has to instigate change, which I think is a time, as we've said, a timely message, and it's inch perfect. It really is I mean, people saying you can't have a perfect film, but you can have films that are perfect to you, I think, and Akiru is one of them. English translation: To Live.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. So. Nothing gives your life meaning like helping others.
That's it.
Contrasts nicely with the opening.
Yeah. The sort of bleakness of 5 Easy Pieces as well. That's wonderful. That's a message, a clear and concise way of just expressing sort of hope, really.
And I think it almost appeals to that fantasy element as well, because there is something vaguely fantastical about it. I think it's maybe the way Kurosawa presents that environment, the post-war time environment which he lives in, the workplace that he inhabits, the nature of the job and what the job encourages you to do, and then all of a sudden this moral reawakening, it feels like a fantasy, but it's still, but it's a fantasy that only, it doesn't detach itself from the realism of the situation. It sort of just grips you more than anything else. Then just one of the best things about the movie, alongside Takashi Shimura, who again, great.
Would that maybe that sort of fantastical element be intentional in the sense that you're coming to terms with the main characters are coming to terms with the fact that it's sort of the end of the road for them, and being at peace with that? maybe that would kind of introduce naturally the reality of the situation would weirdly drift away as they're less fixated on it and more accepting of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and what I love so much about the film is, like I mentioned earlier, there's that then the rest of the film is about his colleagues talking about him after he's died. So they're drinking after his funeral, chatting about him and chatting about the legacy.
Yeah.
And it eventually sort of encourages them to think about themselves and their position and what they do. But it's sort of unclear how long that will impact them for.
Oh, okay.
Because I guess when the finality of your situation is given to you in such a stark fashion, as in you're going to die soon.
Yeah.
It's only then that you can maybe pull yourself out of it.
Right. Okay.
And you sort of hope that would influence others to do the same, but you're unsure as to how powerful that impact would be.
That's interesting because you would think that the easy way out would to be that it's a kind of permanent change.
Yeah,
like you say, you have that phrase, temporary moral realignment.
Yeah,
and it's easier to not acknowledge that. But maybe this film does a little bit. The fact that we can all have moments where we think, I'm going to change my life.
Yeah.
And then gradually, because we're not suffering from stomach cancer, you fall back into routine and life goes on. There you go.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, films can inspire great change, but you still have to put the fucking hard yards in after that, right? And it's all too easy to have overlong showers and watch porn.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
In the shower.
In the shower, yeah. No.
Nice.
So that's Akiru and a couple of other films. All about the ideas of existentialism. Existential ideas. Yeah, I don't know. It's some weirdly cathartic talking about films of this ilk.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, certainly would encourage me to watch more of them.
Yeah,
based on my fascination with 5 Easy Pieces and what you were saying about Akiru. I'm definitely going to seek that one out for sure.
Yes.
Because I think it's important to digest stuff like this, even if at face value it might be quite difficult. Actually, it's really rewarding at the same time because it can be quite life affirming.
Yeah,
and it can force you into thinking about big things. But if you're lucky enough, if the film's good enough, then it will provide some kind of resolution. Not necessarily answers, but resolution for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sort of go back into the terms of into the territory, of armchair philosophy. But if you think about something so much, it makes it seem lofty and inaccessible. And I think if it's one thing that a good film can do, or any piece of media, or even a discussion with someone, but in the context of film, is that it can make you realise that those things, like Akiru, that they're not actually out of reach.
No.
And they're actually closer than you think.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have to be quite so cynical.
No,
Perhaps we. I mean, I myself am very guilty of slipping into, because it's difficult sometimes not to be. But I think if it's anything, films like that can show us is that. Sometimes they can show us the like in 5 Easy Pieces, the dangers of submerging yourself in it and hunting it ceaselessly.
Yeah.
But there's also hope.
Yeah.
And I think films like Akira and even Kaufman, I think, offers some kind of hope somewhere along the line.
It's funny because I am a sort of slight believer in that you can believe that your life is your own and it's up to you. But that doesn't mean you can't also... Like I was saying before, you've got to accept that there are things we don't know as well. Yeah, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So it's about what you do know, and what you do know, hopefully you can control, and then what you don't know, you've got to just wait. I guess it's a waiting game. And it's funny because I'm sure my parents are both listening to that. Hello.
Yeah.
Shout out to them.
Pretty well better be.
Yeah. I was brought up, at least for some part of my life, as a Christian.
Okay.
So, and it's funny, those sort of values have never really left me.
Yeah.
And there's that part of my life which I kind of hold still.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've weaved it a little bit with, like what I was explaining earlier with the science and my fascination with that, and I really think they do meld together a little bit better than a lot of people might think.
Yeah.
And other films that I watched that I haven't mentioned have kind of sculpted that fascination, and I'm thinking of another fucking Boyle one at the moment. But
of course.
Go on, I'll go quickly mention.
Go on. Yeah.
I do want to just mention Sunshine quickly, and very.
So I have seen this one.
Yeah.
there's a notion in that film that the sun is a god, right? And that's cool because it's a scientific artifact, right?
Yeah.
A star, but it treats it like a god at the same time, and I don't know. I think that's quite a interesting way of looking at stuff like that. You know, maybe your idea of God can be scientific, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Who knows? Anyway, I'll shut up now. I'll save a Sunshine podcast for another time.
Still angling for that Sunshine episode.
Yeah, I really am. I'm pushing for it. Sorry, mate.
Questing the cinematic void.
Okay, then, so you made it to the outro. Thank you very much for listening, as always.
Thank you.
We do like our lofty topics here at Send the Boys to Cinemen. We admit we're perhaps not as watertight as others on the area, but we give it a good go, and we appreciate you sticking with us.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking with us through the times in which we find the big words that are kind of to some other podcasters probably at the tip of their tongues, but to me they're like fucking buried. I've got to pause for a little bit.
So next week we're going to continue our journey through the highbrow, and we're going to be discussing not necessarily a film or an idea. We're going to be discussing a film production company.
Interesting.
So we're going to be discussing the work of Canon Films.
Yes.
A production company who shot to stratospheric heights during the 1980s for their no-holds-barred, both-barrels approach to filmmaking and distribution. They have been responsible for so many films across so many genres. They're one of the few production companies that can say we worked with Chuck Norris and Jean-Luc Godard. Not in the same film.
No,
that would have been amazing.
I wish.
Yeah,
another life, maybe.
Yeah, but they're just one of the most bonkers and fascinating production companies of all time. Very much emblematic of the era as well. We will be discussing that. A few of the great films that they made.
Yeah.
So focusing mostly on their action output, I think, because by God, they've made some corkers.
Ooh, baby.
The reasons for that, for their popularity, and how, I guess, your sort of relationship with that sort of style of filmmaking and that era is reflected on now, and how we've picked them up, because we weren't born in the 80s, but we've picked these films up and I don't know, wore them. Badge of honour.
Definitely, embraced them, and
that's the better way of saying it.
No, I prefer war. I like the idea of literally like wearing a Blu-ray, an Arrow release Blu-ray.
As it's a topic of discussion around mullets, sweaty abs, and machine gun fire, it seems completely appropriate to bring our dear friend Lee Markham along for the ride.
Yes.
He's someone that I would say is the reason why I'm so into Canon Films. He's of very much a sort of master of shitty action films.
Yeah, he's a treasure trove, and he'll pull one out of the bag when you least expect it. Not literally.
Well, sometimes he has done, though.
Actually, I spoke too soon, but he can apply the plot of a lot of these films to any given situation, which I find fascinating.
Yes. So we're very much looking forward to having him on. He's going to be losing his Cineboys to Cinemen virginity. He's always been a Cineboy, but he's never been on this podcast.
No.
So we're very much looking forward to having him on, and we'll be, again, dissecting all of these great works, and not necessarily standing up for the politics of the films, but I think there's a few films that me and Lee are very fond of that we'll probably want to discuss as well. So
absolutely, looking forward to it.
So sometime next week, I guess, for that one. In the meantime, see you later.
Thank you.
It's not that shit. Remember that.
I do. Yeah.